Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh and I'm ex-India 115 course and I welcome you all onto the platform. And once again, we are live with the Hindu analysis and we'll be doing the complete analysis of the important articles which are there in our today's The Hindu. And also, we'll be taking the Delhi edition for our today's session. And if you are live, please type in the message in the chat box and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me. Avi, good morning. Who else is here? Please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live. All right. So let's start the session and let's see that which all important articles that we'll be covering or the themes that we'll be covering in today's The Hindu analysis. So Ms. Verma, good morning. And over here, before moving ahead, let me tell you that you can find the complete PDF on the Telegram channel, and this is the Telegram channel. You can either scan the code or you can also search at the rate Bhanwar_StudyIQ. All right, so these are the important themes that we'll be discussing for today's The Hindu analysis. The first one is about the constitutional right to protest and the policing norms as well. Now, this is quite important because in The Hindu for today, you'll find lots of articles related to the student protests that happened at Jantar Mantar. Even the Supreme Court stands over the right to protest, and also about a report or you can say a survey that was published that relates to the policing reforms or the policing norms as well. Then we'll be talking about the TOTR, that is Tiger Outside Tiger Reserves initiative by the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. Then we'll be also talking about the Western Ghats ESA or the ecological sensitive area, the notification that had been notified again for the 7th time this time, the draft notification that we'll be talking about, and even the federal friction when it comes to the complete issue of the Western Ghats, the regime that we are talking about the ecological sensitive area, why they have not yet been notified. So that is again the third topic that we'll be taking for today. And again, this is quite important for the environment. Then we'll be talking about the editorial. There is the editorial that relates to the fire safety, the structural failures, and the administrative apathy as well. So again, this is quite important because this pertains to the, the society or the sociology, and even it pertains to the governance as well. Then we'll be talking about very important article, that is West Bengal Panchayat Amendment Bill 2026. Now, this is important if you have public administration as the optional as well, because this is about, centralization of the local governance, where we are talking about the centralizing tendency and the major amendments that had been done by this bill, which had been passed by the West Bengal Assembly. That is what we'll be talking about in the next. Then we'll be talking about the Prevention of the Unfair Means Amendment Bill 2026. We spoke about it yesterday as well, and there is an article. So again, we'll be talking about this also. Then the lead contamination near the educational institutions. Again, there is an important study that had been published. And then the normative foreign policy, again, it is quite important because there is the article that relates to this. So these are the important things or the themes that we'll be talking about in today's session. But before that, let's see what is the quote for the day. Now, the quote for the day is that law without justice is a wound without a cure. So if there is a law and there is no justice, so it is just like that we have wounds, but there is no cure, and the governance without the ethics, it is a structure built on the quicksand. So again, this is the quote that you can use while you are framing the answer for your ethics as well. You can use this quote for your governance and polity as well, and for your public administration blueprint also. Now, what is the word that is there for today in The Hindu? So it is laconic. Now, this is through the use of as few words as possible. So that is what laconic means, and the synonym is terse, succinct, or even the concise. So the minister remained laconic despite the persistent queries from the reporters, or we can also say the Prime Minister as well. All right. So over here, let's start off with today's analysis. But before that, I wish you a very happy Guru Purnima. And on the occasion of the Guru Purnima, we have the offer on the StudyIQ platform where we are giving you the Guru Kripa offer, where you get the 50% off along with the double validity and even the mentorship that will be there by the mentors. And you can use the code that is BRS Live that will actually fetch you this discount that we have on the platform of StudyIQ. Now, the first news that we are talking about is about the recent protest that was there, and ultimately we can see that when it comes to the complete protest, the PILs which had been filed in the Supreme Court. So, Supreme Court, which is hearing the complete petitions, which is being headed by the Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice Suryakant, he have ordered that there should be immediate release of all minors. Please note over here, he have said that there should be immediate release of all minors which had been detained during the recent student protest and restrain police from taking coercive action against those protesters which are without any criminal antecedents. Now, this is quite different from what the CJP have demanded, and therefore there is another news article as well that says that the CJP have said that there may be another protest as the government will not adhere to the demands that had been raised by the CJP. So, CJP or the Cockroach Janata Party, it had demanded that all the protested, they must be shielded and no FIRs should be, they should be levied or they should be filed against the protesters which were there in the protest. But at the same time, Supreme Court have said that only the release, there should be immediate release of all the minors. So that means the students or anyone who is above the age of, this does not apply to those above 18 years. So ultimately, this is again something that the CJP have not demanded. CJP have said that all the protesters who had been detained, they must be released immediately. So over here, the Supreme Court have said that there should be immediate release of all the minors that are there. And also it said that there should be no kind of the coercive action that should be taken against the protesters which are without the any kind of criminal antecedents. So yesterday we have spoken about that there is the FRS or the facial recognition system that had been used, and according to this, more than 2,800 of the protesters, they had been identified which have the criminal antecedents against them, and thereby there could be the coercive action that could be taken against these more than 2,800 other protesters which had been identified by the Delhi police in the protest. Now, the Supreme Court have indicated it may also constitute an independent high-powered investigation team as well. Now, this is to probe the allegation of the disproportionate police force and the injuries which had been sustained by the police and even the civilian as well. Now, ultimately, when it comes to the complete protest, we have seen that the RAF and the police has also denied any use of the pellet guns. Alright, they have denied initially, but now we have the official GD diaries or the GD entry, that is Journal Diary entry, that have revealed that the RAF have actually fired the anti-riot gun or the plastic pellets on 20th of July in Delhi, that is contradicting its earlier denial that were there. So again, this is quite important because when it comes to transparency, I have always maintained that when it comes to the governance, when it comes to the complete polity, the transparency is one of the important tools that actually builds the public confidence or the public trust. And if the government, it actually hides data and then it comes outside, that actually leads to mistrust into the public, and that is one of the cause that we are seeing, that there had been the mass agitation that actually occurred. So the mistrust must not happen. And what is the solution for the trust building that must happen? So that the important thing is that transparency must be maintained by the government. So now over here, this is quite important because ultimately you can see that there had been various judicial precedents which were there. There was Prakash Singh versus Union of India case in 2006, where actually it was laid down that the police insulation from the political interference must be there. And this is quite important when it comes to the judicial precedent. You may, quote this judicial precedent when you are writing the answer, or it could be asked in your prelims as well. So in 2006, the Supreme Court itself laid down that the police, it must be insulated from any kind of the political interference that is there. Also, I have spoken about this yesterday as well, that in Ramleela Maidan incident versus Home Secretary in 2012, there was the establishment of that the right to sleep and peaceful assembly, they are the fundamental. And the police action, it must meet the test of the necessary precedent or the proportionality as well that was established by the Supreme Court in 2012. And there is Anita Thakur case as well that also we have discussed yesterday. That was in 2016, where the Supreme Court have held that while the police have the duty to maintain the law and order, but at the same time the right to peaceful protest, it cannot be coerced or it cannot be suppressed using the oppressive force or the excessive force that was laid down by the Supreme Court itself. Now, this complete perspective is quite important because this pertains to the fundamental right that we are talking about. This pertains to Article 19.1, 19.1 and 19.1a, even 19.1b as well, because 19.1a, it provides for the right to freedom of speech and expression. And when it comes to right to freedom of assembly, but at the same time for the peaceful purpose or without the arms, so that is provided under Article 1b. This also relates to Article 19.3 as well, that provides for the reasonable restrictions that we have discussed yesterday. So this is quite important because this pertains to Article 19 and ultimately this becomes quite important. Also, there is the status of the police report, all right, that was for the 2025, and over here, according to the status of the police report 2025, you can see over here that what it actually indicates. All right, so there is the survey of the police attitudes or the SPIR 2025, and here you can see that use of the force without punishment. So we have more than 70% of the police personnel which actually agrees that there should be use of force without any kind of punishment, or there should be there are more than 70% of the police personnel which actually favors that there should be they should be allowed to use the force without any kind of the public punishment that will be levied afterwards. So this is where you can see that when it comes to the rule of law that we talk about, so this is where we are talking about that this is normalization of the extrajudicial force that most of the police force it actually considers. Then there is also another thing, that arrest and detention without any court inquiry. So we have 69% of the police personnel that actually agrees with it, and here it actually circumvents the legal and the constitutional safeguards which are provided, especially when it comes to Article 21 that provides with the right to personal liberty. All right. Then we have another thing, that is use of tough methods to create fear. So we have 55% of the police personnel which actually thinks that there should be the use of the excessive force or the use of the tough methods that must be there, so that the fear must be created in the minds of the public. And over here, there is the reliance on the fear-based policing rather than the public trust that we can see again, where I was talking about that there is the mistrust right now that is there among the public. And you can see that according to this report that had been published. Also, when it comes to strict procedure adherence, we have only 41% of the police personnel which actually thinks that there must be strict adherence to the procedures or the strict adherence to the rules which are there. And there is the widespread procedural gaps that we have seen during the arrest, and ultimately here you can see how the police is actually functioning, or you can see the attitude of the police force in India, and this is quite alarming. All right, so again over here this is quite important that you can note over here how we have the erosion of the public trust, and it actually happens through the state machinery or it happens through the bureaucracy, and police is part of that bureaucracy as well. Political science, good morning. All right, the next thing is you can see that when it comes to the complete issue that we are discussing, so it has the various implications that we can see. So I won't be able to join the live class as it overlaps with my college schedule. I watch the recorded videos after my college. Okay, that's nice, political science. All right, so now over here, this is quite important because ultimately, when it comes to the political perspective, so there is a strain on the federal relation when it comes to the central police forces which actually operate within the state jurisdiction during the civil unrest. And also there is a risk of the police weaponization as well when it comes to the report that we have studied just right now. There's also economic implication because there is the disruption of the public infrastructure, the local commerce and the transport corridors as well when we have the prolonged street blockades. And we have seen this especially in the case of the Northeast, where ultimately because of the protest, because of especially when it comes to Manipur. So there had been the prolonged blockades that have actually led to the situation where the people, they were also not getting the bare minimum needs fulfilled because of the blockades of the street. Now, there is a social perspective as well, where there is a breakdown of the trust that is between the youth or the citizen and the state security officials and the agencies that I was talking to you about. And even there is psychological impact on the students which are subjected to the custodial action. So this is quite important. And also there is non-biodegradable chemical residue that is there from the tear gas. And ultimately, we have the plastic pellets as well. They affect the urban ecosystem. And there is, when it comes to the ethical perspective, you will note that there is a disproportionate force that had been used against the unarmed citizen. Now, this is where it actually violates the institutional integrity and also violates the human dignity which had been guaranteed under the Article 21. And thereby, there must be a reasonable and also the accountability that must be maintained for the state agencies which are using the excessive force or excessive force that was used by the police during these protests. Now, coming to the next news that we have, it is coexisting with the tigers outside reserve. Now, this is about TOTR initiative, and ultimately this is quite important because the Ministry of Environment, Forest and the Climate Change, it has actually launched this initiative, that is Tigers Outside Tiger Reserve, TOTR initiative. Basically, to manage, we have 35 to 40% of the India's wild tiger population that is right now residing outside the designated tiger reserve. Now, there is a phase 1 pilot implementation which is actually targeting the total 40 of the forest divisions which are across 9 of the states. Now, these states are basically, we have Madhya Pradesh, we have Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, UP, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Telangana as well as Assam also. Now, when it comes to the complete perspective, you may note over here that the initiative is basically according to the All India Tiger estimation that was done in 2022, which actually shows the population growth to 3,682 tigers which are there. And ultimately, because of the population growth, there is severe human-wildlife conflict that we are talking about in the terrestrial forest fringes as well. Now, when it comes to the Project Tiger, the Project Tiger was launched in 1973, where we had just only 9 reserves, and now the reserves, they have increased to 58 in the complete country as well. Now, this is quite important because ultimately the tiger reserves, they are notified under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and basically the purpose of implementing or purpose of passing the Wildlife Protection Act was basically to preserve or to conserve the tiger population in 1972 as well. Now, over here, this is quite important because you may be asked that when or we have the NTCA. NTCA is basically National Tiger Conservation Authority. So it was also, this is also under, it is also under the Wildlife Protection Act. But when it comes to Wildlife Protection Act, so NTCA was actually not there initially, or it was not instituted initially, but it was later on when the amendment was made to the Wildlife Protection Act in 2006. So in the 2006, we had the NTCA that was formed, and that is why this becomes very important, because there had been total 10 years or a decade when it comes to the formation of NTCA, which is basically responsible for conservation of the tigers in India. Also, this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the population, that is 3,682, remember this is more than 70% of the global population. So we have the highest population when it comes to the tigers in the world, where we have 3,682 tigers which actually resides in India according to the recent estimates or the population enumeration. Now, over here, when it comes to the complete perspective, there is a quite important factor that you have to keep in mind. That is basically, it is about the interstate cooperation when it comes to the tigers, because the tigers, they are the part of the wildlife. Alright, so there has to be an interstate cooperation for the transboundary corridor management. The local political pressure is there because of the human casualties. And that is why this TOTR, that is Tigers Outside Tiger Reserves, initiative had been taken by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. At the same time, economically perspective, you can see that there is the financial loss that is because of the cattle depredation. Because ultimately, the tigers, they need the prey. This is basically where we are talking about prey and predator relationship, and they actually, what happens is that they feed upon the cattle, and therefore there is a financial loss when it comes to the community which actually lives in these forest fringes. Alright, because when it comes to cattle is deemed to be a wealth for the rural population. Also, there is a cost of the crop damage as well, and there is a need for the swift compensation mechanism to prevent any kind of retaliatory killings when it comes to the tiger population. Also, when it comes to the complete perspective through the social lens, you can see that there is a panic among the agrarian communities. There is social disruption in the fringe villages, and even there has to be the community engagement through the primary response teams that must be prioritized. When it comes to the environmental perspective, there is a good news, or this is a good news where ultimately there will be preservation of the forest corridors that will prevent the genetic bottleneck and even maintain the apex predator equilibrium as well. But this also raises the ethical issue, and that is where it is about balancing the human lives and the rural livelihoods against the intrinsic right to life of the endangered fauna or the tigers that we are talking about. So again, this is quite important, or this news is important for your preparation. Now, we can see what is the reason. The reason or the cause for the TOTR initiative, or the Tigers Outside Tiger Reserve initiative, is basically that there is the saturation of the core tiger reserves. And because of this saturation, what happens is that there is fragmentation of the historical corridors because of the linear infrastructure, where we have the infrastructure projects, whether it is the highways, whether it is the railways, which are ongoing right now. And ultimately what it leads to, that there is the rise in the human casualties. Also, there is the illegal, snaring, there is retaliatory poisoning, and even the administrative strain that is there on the complete territorial forest staff that is there. And this actually leads to the wildlife and the human conflict. Good morning, Ankit. Alright, so over here, the advantage of the TOTR initiative, it will be that ultimately there will be the expansion of the viable genetic pool, there will be securing of the non-protected areas and the forest as well, and this will involve the local communities in the ecotourism and monitoring also. But thereby, there are the challenges as well. The challenge is basically about the procedural delay in the compensation, where we do not have the proper or the immediate compensation criteria when it comes to the human and the wildlife conflict. There is a shortage of the trained wildlife veterinarians as well, and there is inadequate real-time early warning infrastructure when it comes to the human wildlife conflict in India. And these are the challenges that we must look forward to getting the solution to, so that ultimately these initiatives, they could be this could be successful. Now over here you can see that these are the regions, or we can say these are the corridors that we are talking about when it comes to the tiger reserves. So here you can see that here this is where we have Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. So between Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, you will see that this region is where we have a important corridor that lies over here. This is in the central India. Also you can see over here, this is where we have Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh. Also here you will see that there are the corridors just near about Arunachal Pradesh, the border of the Arunachal Pradesh that you can see here. Then in the Tarai region as well, this is the corridor that we are talking about, and also in the South India as well. So these are the important corridors which lies where we have in the Western Ghats region as well, where we have the tiger population that actually resides. So these are the important corridors that you can see on the map. Alright, coming to the next news that we have, it is Centre reissue the draft on the Western Ghats Eco Zone. Now again, this is quite important because this is the 7th time that this draft notification had been released by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, where it is about proposing the ecological sensitive area, or the ESA, in the Western Ghat zone of 56,825.7 kilometers square across the 6 of the Western Ghat states which are there. Now here it is quite important again that the previous draft it has lapsed on 27th of July 2026 without finalization because there had been sustained objection from the state governments regarding the boundary demarcation and even the development restrictions as well. Now here again, when it comes to the draft notification, it prohibits mining in the region, quarrying and even the new thermal power projects and the large construction projects. But at the same time, when it comes to the hydroelectric projects, so it actually does not prohibit, but it actually regulates the hydroelectric projects. That is what you have to remember when it comes to the complete perspective. Now here, the major problem is, or the major issue is about 2 of the committees which were constituted for protection and conservation of the Western Ghats. The first committee that was that was constituted, it was in 2011, and we are talking about Madhav Gadgil committee, which actually proposed that the complete Western Ghat that we are talking about, that is nearly about 1,30,000 of the kilometer square of the area. So Gadgil committee said that the complete Western Ghat, it must be declared as ecological sensitive area and there must be graded protection that should be there. That is, the zoning should be there where we should have 3 of the zone. We should have ESZ1, 2, ESZ3 as well. Now this was actually rejected by the states because this was actually overly restrictive. Later on, because of the problem that the complete, the Gadgil formula, that was quite restrictive, and also this is quite important because you may find this question in your mains because recently there, when it comes to Gadgil, so Madhav Gadgil, he actually died in January 2026. So again, this becomes important because this had been in the news and we are seeing Western Ghat, which is actually the ecological sensitive zone as well. Also, so again, this is quite important for your mains. If you are going to appear in mains 2026, you may find this question in your examination about Madhav Gadgil or the complete Western Ghat regions. Now, what happened was later on there was Kasturi Rangan committee that was constituted in 2013. Now, Kasturi Rangan committee actually recommended that there must be 37% of the Western Ghats, nearly about 59,950 kilometers square, that must be declared as ecological sensitive area, focusing on the natural landscapes and the cultural landscapes as well. Now, what is the difference between natural landscape as compared to the cultural landscape? So when it comes to the natural landscapes, so they are where we are talking about the pristine forest. We have the pristine forest and also the ecosystem that is included in the natural ecosystem, all right, or the natural landscape. But when it comes to the cultural landscape, so cultural landscape is basically where we have the human settlements. There are human settlement. There is also agriculture that is taken into account. All right. So these are the regions which were actually excluded. The cultural landscapes, they were excluded, and the natural landscape was included, and thereby the Kasturi Rangan committee, it said that there must be 37% of the Western Ghats that must be notified as the ecological sensitive area. Now, the ecological sensitive area, please remember, when it comes to ESAs, so they are basically notified under which act? They are notified under which act? They are notified under the Section 3 of the Environmental Protection Act. Under Section 3 of Environment Protection Act. All right, very important. Now, this Environment Protection Act was passed in 1986. Now, this is basically, or the environmental sensitive or the ecological sensitive areas, they are basically notified so that there could be the curb on the human presence or the human activities in these regions which are basically just near the protected areas which are there. So the ecological sensitive areas are notified where we have the protected areas, and the nearby areas, they are basically included into the ecological sensitive area so that the human activities, they could be controlled, they could be restrained in the region. Now this is quite important because when it comes to the Western Ghats, remember the Western Ghat region, it is also the, you can say, when it comes to Western Ghats, so it was in 2012, right? It was in 2012 that this was accorded the World Heritage Site status as well. Now, this is under the World Heritage Site as well. And I'm talking about why World Heritage Site? Because recently we had the 45th World Heritage Site that had been notified. All right, the 45th site, that is the Sarnath site. And after this site that had been notified as the World Heritage Site, now we are 6th globally when it comes to the World Heritage Sites and also the 2nd in the Asia Pacific region, and that is why this becomes important as well. And Western Ghats, they were notified as the World Heritage Site in 2012, again quite important. And this is again also important because this pertains to the directive principle of state policy and even the fundamental duty. When it comes to the preservation and conservation of the environment, that is a kind of, you can say that is a subject matter which is there in the directive principles as well under Article 48A. And this is also under the fundamental right, that is basically under Article 51G. And therefore, this is quite important when it comes to the environmental protection that had been provided with the constitutional backing as well under the directive principles and the fundamental duty also. All right, so then this is quite important when it comes to the complete perspective. You can see that the proposed ecological sensitive area that is there in various states. In Karnataka, it is the highest, where it is 20,668 of the kilometer square, and as a percentage of total, it is 36.37. Then Maharashtra, it is 17,340, and then we have Kerala, then we have Tamil Nadu, Goa, and Gujarat as well. Now, there was a report actually which which was there, or the news that was there, where it is actually that when it comes to the states, we have the Gujarat, we have the Maharashtra as well, and Goa. They have said, or they have told that they are ready to move and declare the ecological sensitive area that had been proposed according to the draft that was there before. But now the draft have already lapsed, and we have the 7th time that the new draft has been proposed, or it has been released by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, even the climate change. Now, this is quite important because politically there is basically the conflict that is between the central conservation mandates and the state political compulsions which are driven by the local agrarian, the vote banks, and thereby the local, or you can say the state government, they actually do not want to move ahead and declare the ecological sensitive areas. There's also economically, there will be the restrictions that will be there on the quarrying and mining, and there will be infrastructure that will actually impact and affect the local revenue and the employment in the hilly districts. And that is one of the major concerns. When you can see the economic perspective, you can see the political perspective as well, why the state governments, they do not want to move ahead and declare the ecological sensitive area. Also, when it comes to the social perspective, you can see that there is a fear among the local farmers regarding the restrictions that will be there on the land use. Also, the eviction and the loss of the property rights, and these fear are basically the major or the root cause that is between the inhibition that we can see in the case of the state governments for notifying the ecological sensitive area in the Western Ghats. But it is very important that we must realize that the Western Ghats is actually the global biodiversity hotspot, and even the water tower of the peninsular India, and unmitigated development that will escalate the landslide risk as well. We have seen this previously in the case of Kerala. This time itself, there were the loss of life because of the Wayanad landslide. So we have seen the disaster that have struck in Kerala because of this, and ultimately there is the need to protect the ecological sensitive area or the Western Ghats as well. This also raises the ethical question, and that is about the intergenerational equity, where it is about preserving the ecological stability for the future generation as compared to meeting the immediate livelihoods. So here we have the ecological, the ethical perspective as well that you can see in the complete scenario. So when it comes to the Western Ghat regions, there are 6 of the states where actually there lies. We have the Gujarat, we have Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, where we have the Western Ghats, which actually they are expanded. Also, there are major rivers which actually originates from the Western Ghats. We have Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, Tungbhadra, Bhima, Ghatprabha and Malprabha as well. And here, the river valleys, they actually cut across and they make the gaps, or there are the passes which had been made over here, and they converge at the Nilgiri Hills, where we have the Eastern Ghats and the Western Ghats, they actually meet. And again, when it comes to the age, so remember that they are older than the Himalayas because they were formed during the Gondwana breakup, where actually the part of the western, the slope that we have, or the Arabian Sea, it actually broke up and it subsided. And that is why when it comes to Western Ghats, remember that when it comes to Western Ghats, so what happens is that it is the escarpment, where actually what happens is that its eastern slope, the eastern slope is gentle. But when it comes to the western slope of the Western Ghats is steep, and that is the reason, it is the major reason why when we have the rivers which actually move towards the Arabian Sea, they do not make delta. Why? Because they are falling from a steep height, and that is why they cannot make the deltas and they make the estuaries. So this is very, very important. The notable peaks which are there is Anai Mudi, which is the highest peak, followed by Doda Beta and the Kalsubai peak as well. Here you will find the forests which ranges from the tropical evergreen to the semi-evergreen, moist deciduous, and even the Shola grasslands or the Shola one as well. Now Shola is the temperate forest which you will find in the Western Ghats above the height of 1500 meters, and those are called as the Shola forest. Now, very important, had been asked in the examination numerous times. And the climate over here, we have the western slope of the Western Ghats, where actually you will find the tropical monsoon type of climate, where there is the high rainfall and high humidity as well. All right. So these are the Western Ghats or the Western Ghat region that we are talking about. Now the next one is about the urban nightmare, where there is the fire with no escape. I told you this news or this editorial is quite important because ultimately this is about administrative apathy as well. And here, when it comes to the complete series, so there had been series of the fatal urban fire outbreaks or the incidents which are across the major cities, whether it is Aliganj in Lucknow, in Malviya Nagar in Delhi, and in Bhiwadi in Rajasthan as well. Now, this have highlighted the systemic failures that is there in the municipal fire safety enforcement and even the land use regulation as well. Now, India, when it comes to India, so we have recorded that there are between 13,000 to 15,000 of the fire deaths annually, with the urban commercial establishment operating illegally in the residential zone, acting as the structural death traps as well. Now, after these incidents, what had happened was the SITs had been constituted. Now, the SITs or the special investigating teams, they composed of the closed loop administrative personnel which actually failed to hold the political executives or the municipal leadership as well accountable. Now, what do you think, or what is the reason behind the complete mishap or the mishappenings which are happening? So, what is the major reason? The major reason is that we had the 74th Amendment Act. Now, we had the 74th Amendment Act which was passed in 1992. Now, according to this, what happened was that we have created the urban local bodies. But what happened was that we have just created them, but we forgot to give them the tooth or the teeth to bite. Because ultimately, we have the urban local bodies which are there, but they cannot function independently because financially, because administratively, they are dependent upon the state machinery. And even when we have the political leadership that is there in the urban local bodies, so they are marred by the administrative personalities or the bureaucracy, and that actually is the major reason that the urban local bodies, because they cannot function completely independently, and that is why we have two different sets which had been created, where we have the administrative machinery, we have the urban local bodies, and ultimately that happens what is that it leads to the blame shifting between both of them. Now, this is quite important because you can see that there is the urban local body fragmentation, where we have the municipal corporation, we have the development authorities, the fire department, and the public works department as well. Now, ultimately, because of this, the fragmentation that is there, what happens is that there is weak enforcement and the toleration of the illegality as well. Where there are the unauthorized conversion, there is the missing emergency exits, and that leads to the urban disasters. Now, these urban disasters, I'm not just talking about the fire, but also the waterlogging and flooding, and there is just superficial post-disaster probe that happens through the SITs, and there is no suspension without the structural reforms. So this is quite important because it relates to the urban safety or the urban mechanism as well. Now again, when it comes to the administrative purpose or public administration or even for the governance and ethics, this news is quite important, which relates to the changes that had been done in the West Bengal Panchayat. Now the West Bengal Legislative Assembly have passed the West Bengal Panchayat Second Amendment Bill of 2026. Now, what are the key changes that had been done is it actually transferred the check signing and the financial disbursement rights from the elected Gram Panchayat Pradhans to the bureaucrats, where actually the power will be there with the Panchayat secretaries, with the executive assistants and the BDOs as well. And the state government have stripped the Pradhan and the municipal chairperson as well of their rights or the power that was there as registrar of the birth and deaths, which had been reassigned to the roles to dedicated state officer. Now this is a structural shift that I'm talking about, where it is actually about the bureaucratic control that is over the local self-government institutions, or where actually the local self-government institutions, they are not being provided with the powers that is required. Now this is quite important because when it comes to West Bengal, remember that it was in 1973. It was in 1973, and since 1973, the West Bengal have the three-tier system of the panchayat that was made into the reality. All right, and this is, we are talking about 2 decades earlier than the 73rd Amendment Act that was passed. So West Bengal have a legacy, or West Bengal has a history of the panchayati rule that was there. It was established in 1973 ahead of the elections that were conducted in 1975, I guess, and it is, you can see the gap, because ultimately the 73rd Amendment Act was passed in 1992. So we had 2 decades earlier where there was the establishment of the 3-tier democracy at the grassroots level in West Bengal. Also, this is quite important because this relates to Article 243G. Now, what is Article 243G? Just read it through the bare act that you may have. But let me tell you, Article 243G, it actually says that the state government must provide the powers. The state government must endow the panchayat with the powers, with the rights, so that they can function with the, with the proper teeth, or you can say that they can function as the bodies of the local self-government. Also, this is quite important because when it comes to Supreme Court, so Supreme Court in the SR Bommai case, that was held in 1994, and even there was a case, Bhanumati case. So in both the case, in Bhanumati case, in SR Bommai case as well, Supreme Court have laid down that basically the grassroots level democracy is quite important. And over here, the Supreme Court have laid down that ultimately the local self-government, which had been institutionalized in India, they are integral to the basic democratic governance that we have in India. And that is why this is quite important when it comes to the, over here, the bureaucratic control that is now over the local self-government that have been imposed in West Bengal itself. The next question, the next topic that we have for today, we have discussed it yesterday as well. It is about the paper leak bill, or the union government which have introduced the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Amendment Bill 2026. Now over here, there are the harsher penalties which had been imposed, along with a minimum of 7 years in prison for the organized examination related offences as well. It also mandates that there will be setting of the special fast-track courts for the examination offences that requires the investigation that must conclude within 2 months. And after investigation, the trial must conclude within 3 months. So there will be a total period of 5 months that will be there in the adjudication of any of the offences related to the paper leaks. Now there is the, when it comes to the organized leak syndicate, or the paper leak syndicate, it is where we have the criminal networks which engage in the deliberate theft or the unauthorized digital access and even the systemic distribution of the question paper for the monetary leaks or the monetary gains. So that is what organized crime syndicate or the paper leak syndicate that is over here. Now, what are the changes that had been proposed by the recent amendment that had been brought by the government? So the changes that had been proposed is basically the first one is that it relates to the individual unfair means. So for the individual unfair means, earlier there were 3 to 5 years of the prison and even fine that was up to 10 lakh rupees. But now, according to the amendment bill, this had been increased from 5 to 10 years and the fine that had been upped to 50 lakh rupees. Now, for the service provider fine, the fine was basically 1 crore and there was 4 years of the debarment. But now over here, the fine has been raised to 5 crore and there will be 8 years of the debarment that will be there for the service provider. Now, in charge of the service provider, earlier the present time was 3 to 10 years and there was a fine of 1 crore that had been increased again. When it comes to the prison time, the minimum 5 years of the prison had been imposed and the fine had been increased to 5 crore rupees. Now, for the organized crime, examination crime, earlier the time period or the imprisonment was from 5 to 10 years. Now, here the minimum 7 years of the imprisonment had been levied and the minimum fine has been increased to 10 crore from the 1 crore that was earlier. Earlier, there was no investigation timeline. Now, the investigation timeline is 2 months according to the special task force that will be there, and the trial adjudication, earlier it was according to the standard code procedures and the timelines. Now this will be by the fast track code that will actually conclude the trial within 3 months. So these are the proposed amendments when it comes to the complete the proposed amendments to the 2024 Act that we are talking about. Now again, when it comes to the next news, it is also quite important because over here, this is about the foreign policy. Alright, this is about foreign policy and ultimately it says, sorry, not foreign policy, this is about the urban Indian private schools which are at the risk of proximity to toxic lead site. So there is the Center for the Global Development or CGD. It has released its global report which is titled Schools in the Shadow of Toxic Sites. Pollution, proximity in low and middle income countries, which have revealed that New Delhi has topped the capital cities globally with 90% or more than 90% of the private urban schools which are located within 5 kilometers of the documented toxic sites which had been contaminated by lead, by mercury, by cadmium, by arsenic and the pesticides as well. Now this is quite important because remember, in your prelims you could be asked about the various disorders. Alright, just see which all disorders are created because of lead, because of mercury, because of cadmium and even because of the arsenic as well. Like for example, with mercury, it is Minamata disease that is actually caused. So please go through the disorders because again this becomes important for your prelims, and this report actually tells that in the low and the middle income countries, the urban schools, they are basically 4 to 28 times more likely than the rural schools to be situated near the toxic industrial or the informal recycling sites which are there. So again, this report is quite important. And then we have the another news that is basically about the beyond national interest, which is the role of ethics and emotions in the world politics. So basically this report or this study that we are talking about, it actually have examined and highlighted that how the contemporary international relation that we are talking about, they are shifting from pure realism. So earlier when it comes to the realism, so basically earlier the national or you can say the international relation, they were based upon the power, they were based upon deterrence and the national interest as well. Alright, so that was the realism that was earlier in the international relations. But now they are shifting from this to incorporate the ethics, to incorporate the collective emotions and even the moral legitimacy as well. Now what we are talking about, that we are moving from realism to normative IR. Alright, so that is normative. That is when it comes to ought to, that is what is normative means. That what ought to be the international relation. So the international relations are moving towards normative from the realism, and that is what this study it talks about. Now Ultimately, we have the events like, for example, West Asian crisis that is basically changing the global perception of the conflicts, and even the assertion of the global south that actually demonstrate that there is the military dominance without any moral legitimacy that basically fails to secure the long-term strategic outcomes as well. Now, when it comes to India's international policy or the foreign policy, it projects civilizational values through the concepts like we have Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. That actually means that the complete world is a one family, and also our project or our international relations, they are based upon the leadership in the global south as well. So this is again quite important article that you can see in today's The Hindu, and again this relates to your IR. So if you have PSIR, that is Political Science and International Relation, as your optional, so please go through this article, because that will change the perspective of your complete thinking about the international relation. Also, when it comes to the UN Charter, so we have the UN Charter principles as well, and there is Article 2 of the UN Charter that actually says that every nation have the sovereign, they are sovereign. Every nation is sovereign, they have equality, and also there must be peaceful settlement of the disputes which had been laid by the Article 2 of the UN Charter as well, that you must remember. Now, there is another news that you can see on the first page itself, and it is about industrial growth hits 23-month high of 7.3%. Now, this is about IIP, or the index of the industrial production, but at the same time, please remember that there are the analysts and the researchers which have actually cautioned that this is basically the we will face the lower than the average or expected that the complete growth, it will not continue in the same momentum, because we have the lower than the average monsoon that is there, and ultimately there is the West Asian crisis as well that will actually slow down the IIP. But at the same time, we have 23-month high of the IIP that had been recorded. And also another news that is basically about the Kaveri River, where it has said the Kaveri Water Regulation Committee or CWRC have said to release the water for the Karnataka as well. Now, we have discussed Kaveri River yesterday, so this becomes very important that you may be asked about Kaveri River in your prelims. That becomes important, and also the Mekedatu Dam. Now, both are important because there is another article about Mekedatu Dam where the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has written to the Prime Minister as well. So, therefore, these are the important articles that you will find in today's The Hindu, which are quite important for your preparation for the civil services. Now, let's see which are the important questions that you can find related to today's articles. The first one is, with reference to ecological sensitive areas in India, consider the following statements. First, they are declared under the provision of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 to protect core ecological reserves. Second, the Kasturi Rangan Committee recommended declaring approximately 37% of Western Ghats as an ESA focusing on natural landscapes while excluding the cultural landscapes. Third, once an ESA is finalized, organic farming and traditional agriculture activities by local communities are completely prohibited. So, what will be the right answer? Let's see. So, I am getting B, that is true, that is 2 only, because when it comes to the first one, they are not declared under the Wildlife Protection Act, but actually under the Environmental Protection Act, or the we have the Environment Protection Act that was passed in 1986. So, that is first is incorrect, even the third is incorrect because organic activities are allowed. The second is correct, so that is why answer is B, that is 2 only. Now, the second one that we have is, consider following statements regarding the Public Examination Prevention of Unfair Means Amendment Bill 2026. First, the bill introduces a minimum of 7 years of imprisonment and a minimum fine of 10 crore rupees for individuals participating in organized examination crimes. Then the bill extends the debarment period for service providers engaging in unfair means from 4 years to 8 years. And the legislation designates the High Court of each state to act as the primary court of trial for all offences under the Act. So, which of the statement given above is correct? So, what will be the right answer here? Let's see. So here the correct answer is yes, 3 is wrong, and ultimately we have 1 and 2, that is A is the correct answer. That is right. Now coming to the next question, that is with reference to the Tigers Outside Tiger Reserves TOTR initiative, consider the following statements. First, it is the project is launched by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the National Tiger Conservation Authority, funded primarily through India's Compensatory Afforestation Fund. Second, the project focuses on a landscape level approach across multiple states to secure tiger corridors and manage human-wildlife conflict. And the pilot phase of the project is designed to cover all forest divisions across India with recorded tiger presence. So which of the statement given above is correct? So again, let's see what will be the correct answer here. So I told you we have the phase 1 of the project. It's all right, Filmi Dunya. And over here, we have the 9 of the states which are being covered under the phase 1. So third is incorrect. We have first and second which are correct, and answer is A. That is the right answer. Now coming to the next question, the Supreme Court ruling in Alamatti case frequently cited in interstate water river water disputes established which of the following legal precedents? First, the absolute right of the upstream states to manage water resources within their borders without downstream interference. Second, the requirement of the lower riparian consent and central government approval for upstream construction projects that alter regulated water flows. Third, the mandatory allocation of the equal water shares among all basin states regardless of population, and the exclusion of the Supreme Court jurisdiction under Article 262 of the Constitution. So what is the Almaty case that had been frequently cited in interstate river water disputes? What it relates to? Now over here, this relates to basically when it comes to interstate water disputes, it is basically where it was laid down that there is a requirement of the lower riparian consent and the central government approval for the upstream construction projects that alters the regulated water flow, and that is B is the correct answer. Now consider the following statements regarding the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act and local governance. First, Article 243G of the Constitution mandates the complete devolution of the financial and taxation powers to Gram Panchayats. Second, the 11th schedule contains 29 functional areas over which panchayats may be devolved power to manage the rural development. And third, constitutional provisions allow the state legislature to determine the extent of administrative and financial powers devolved to local bodies. So what will be the correct answer? So again, this is an easy question because ultimately when it comes to 243G, it actually lays down for the devolution of the financial and taxation power to the Gram Panchayat, but not completely. Alright, so ultimately this does not mandate the complete devolution. So first is incorrect. We have second and third which are true, and thereby again the answer is B, that is 2 and 3 only. Now we have the next question that is basically with reference to the Center for Global Development CGD report School in the Shadow of Toxic Sites. Consider the following statements. First, the study indicates that pediatric exposure to heavy metals, lead, can permanently impact cognitive development and lower the children's IQ. Also, unlike trends observed in many high-income nations, urban private schools in developing countries are more likely to be located near toxic waste sites than the rural public schools. And the report notes that Mexico City has successfully reduced heavy metal contamination near the schools through the structured industrial zoning. So which of the statement given above is correct? So write down this answer in the comment section. Alright, this is the 6th question that we are talking about, and let me know about this answer. I'm not giving you the answer. Just go through this and write down in the comment section that what will be the correct answer. And you can go through this these are the mains questions that you can practice for your mains examination if you are appearing for 2026. The first one is the legal resolution of interstate water disputes under Article 262 often runs into challenges due to monsoonal variability, climate change and growing urban demands. Critically examine or evaluate this statement with reference to the Kaveri Basin water dispute and the proposed Mekedatu Reservoir project. Then second, analyze how state legislative changes that transfer financial and administrative controls from elected local heads to appointed bureaucrats impact the democratic goals of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. And then third, examine the ecological, social and economic factors involved in balancing environmental conservation with developmental priorities in fragile zone and assess the role of landscape level initiatives like the TOTR or the Tiger Outside Tiger Reserves project. So these are the questions that you can try for, or you can try writing the answer for your mains examination. So that would be all in today's session, but do not forget to like the session, do share the session with your friends as well, and do subscribe if you have not subscribed it yet. And let me tell you once again that on the platform of StudyIQ, we have the GS Foundation batch. Now, this GS Foundation batch is quite important because ultimately they build your base, they build your concepts, and here you get the structured classes. All right, you get the complete structured classes where you do not have to worry about your schedule, and we actually leads you right from the NCERT base towards the advanced concepts. Now, today is the Guru Purnima, and on the eve of the Guru Purnima, we are extending the offer that is there for you, and that is that you are getting 50% off along with the double validity and even the mentorship by the rankers as well. Now, you can enroll into this batch if you are appearing or you wish to appear in 2027, 28 or 29, where ultimately you can use the code that is BRS Live that will give you this offer that is here. And sir, listen please, I am not good in English. Please give me some instruction that how can I improve this? I am just trying to understand but not able to. So over here, Filmi Dunya, this is quite important because when it comes to English language, so any of the language you have to understand. That is, for learning a language, there are three things which are important. And these three things are reading, writing and listening. So until and unless you are doing these three things, you won't be able to speak. So you have to read the language, you have to write the language, and you have to listen the language. Let me tell you how I built my English vocabulary or my English speaking skills. All right, it was majorly through listening. All right, majorly through listening. I used to listen to the series or the the news that are there. I used to what I used to do was that initially when I was also in your phase, so I used to go through the closed captions, that is CC, and used to open up the closed captions and then used to just read the captions along with seeing the series or any of the news or the article or the documentaries that I'm listening to. So that have built up the space, and also it has built up the kind of the vocabulary that I was looking forward to. Also, the another thing that is quite important, from reading, listening and writing, there is another thing that is required for speaking fluently and for building up the language, and that is that you have to think in the language. If you are thinking in Hindi language, if you are thinking in your native language and then you are translating that sentence later on, so what happens is that ultimately that there is a gap that comes, and that gap actually leads to the problem in speaking. And thereby you have to have the thinking. You have to think in the language in which you are speaking. And then only you will be able to understand, then only you will be able to speak and even, comprehend what had been spoken. So that is very, very important. All right. So that would be all. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here on the platform of StudyIQ. Please do not forget to like the session and also share this session with your friends and even subscribe if you have not subscribed it yet. Thank you, Ms. Verma, Political Science, and the others who have joined me on the platform for the complete Hindu analysis. I will see you tomorrow at the same time, that is at 9:30 for the another analysis. So that would be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Jai Hind. Thank you.